Diabetes is often spoken of today as if it has always been part of human history, as if it is a natural condition that has existed since the beginning of medicine. But when you look back to the writings of Hippocrates, the man considered the father of medicine, living nearly 400 years before Christ, you find something remarkable. He never meant diabetes at all. For a condition that now affects hundreds of millions of people worldwide, its absence in ancient medical literature tells us something important. It tells us that diabetes is not an ancient disease. It is not an inevitable part of human physiology. It is, in fact, a modern condition born out of modern habits, modern foods, and modern lifestyles. When you see that connection clearly, you start to do that the body is simply reacting to the conditions we create around it. And that reaction, Newton's third law, reminds us that for every action there is indeed an equal and opposite reaction. If the pancreas is struggling today, it is not doing so without a cause. There is a reason, just as Proverbs reminds us that a curse does not come without a cause, meaning every effect in the body has a cause behind it.
The question is not, why do I have diabetes, but what changed in the world that made the pancreas start to struggle? For thousands of years, people lived on whole foods, natural fibers, unrefined grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, vegetables, fruits that were seasonal, and meals that were simple. Even bread, which people often assume has always been the same, was different. Ancient breads were made from grains that were tall, less dense, and far less starchy. People were not bombarded with refined sugars or industrialized starches. Their daily life involved movement, sunlight, rest, physical labor, and meals that fed the body slowly and steadily. The pancreas in such an environment released insulin gently and naturally, never being pushed to its limits. Compare that to today, where nearly every meal is filled with high carbohydrate, low fiber foods, where wheat has been hybridized and modified to produce far more starch, where sugar hides in nearly every packaged product, and where people are sedentary and stressed and deprived of rest. The pancreas was never designed to handle wave after wave of high glucose surges, meal after meal, day after day. It is at taking a gentle, delicate organ and putting it on a treadmill that never stops. Eventually it tires, it slows, it becomes overwhelmed, and the result is insulin resistance, prediabetes, and finally diabetes. So when we say diabetes is a lifestyle disease, that is not a criticism but an explanation.
The lifestyle created the condition, and if the lifestyle created it, then changes in lifestyle can begin to undo it. When you understand that diabetes did not exist widely in ancient cultures, you begin to see how much our modern world has shifted. Food has changed, preparation methods have changed, portions have changed, stress levels have changed, movement has decreased, even the timing of meals has changed. Everything around us has pushed the pancreas into a state of constant emergency response. And so the question becomes not why is my pancreas failing, but what conditions have I created that my pancreas cannot keep up with? The moment you stop blaming the organ and start examining the environment surrounding it, a new sense of control begins to emerge. You realize that the pancreas is not your enemy, it is your servant, working tirelessly and faithfully despite the demands placed upon it. And like any living tissue, when given the right environment, steady fuel, rest between meals, low glycemic foods, hydration, movement, it begins to revive, repair, and restore its function. This is the hope. And this is where healing begins, not by fighting the body, but by understanding it. When we talk about conquering diabetes, one of the most foundational truths we must understand is that the foods we choose each day can either soothe the pancreas or strain it, and the difference between those two states is often determined by the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream. This is where the glycemic index becomes such a powerful guide. Low glycemic foods release their sugar slowly and steadily, giving the pancreas time to respond gently with just the right amount of insulin. No rush, no panic, no sudden demands. The body thrives in that steady environment. Every cell is designed to take in a slow, consistent stream of fuel, not a flood. When you choose berries instead of bananas, sweet potatoes instead of white potatoes, whole ancient grains instead of modern hybridized wheat, you shift the burden off your pancreas and allow it to work in the way it was divinely designed to work, calmly, rhythmically, with precision, rather than pressure. It is remarkable how your body responds when you stop sending glucose in wild surges. The pancreas, which has been battered by years of high-carb meals and refined sugars, finally begins to breathe. Instead of having to release large quantities of insulin in a frantic effort to bring down dangerously high glucose levels, it can release smaller amounts in harmony with the pace of digestion. That slow and steady release prevents the roller coaster highs and lows that exhaust both the pancreas and the brain. Many diabetics describe feeling tired, irritable, anxious, or shaky, and often they believe it is simply part of the disease, but more often than not, it is part of the blood sugar swings caused by high glycemic foods. When those foods disappear from the diet and are replaced with slow-burning foods, beans, lentils, chickpeas, nuts, seeds, vegetables, whole fruits with fiber, the body enters a more balanced state and clarity begins to return. What people often do less is that low glycemic eating is not restrictive, it is restorative. It is not about depriving the body, but nourishing it in a way that it can actually use. Your cells cannot benefit from fuel that enters too quickly because the insulin response becomes overwhelmed. But when the release is slow and steady, glucose is absorbed efficiently, energy levels remain stable, and cravings diminish on their own. Many guests at the retreat have told me that after a few days of low glycemic eating, their desire for sweets simply fades. It is not willpower, it is chemistry. When you stop spiking your blood sugar, your brain stops demanding emergency fuel. Their approach is not complicated. It does not require exotic ingredients or elaborate recipes. It simply asks that you choose foods close to the way nature made them and refined, whole, rich in fiber, and digesting slowly. A bowl of berries in the morning instead of a sweetened cereal, a larger serving of vegetables at lunch instead of bread, a portion of legumes with dinner instead of pasta. These small changes create a profound shift in how your pancreas performs. Over time, the pancreas becomes less inflamed, the cells regain sensitivity to insulin, and many people find that their medication needs begin to decrease. The beautiful part of this process is that it is safe, gentle, and deeply aligned with the body design. You are not forcing anything. You are cooperating with the natural way the body handles fuel. Low glycemic foods are not a temporary fix, but a long-term support system that allows your pancreas to repair from years of strain. By choosing foods that provide a slow, sustained delivery of nutrients, you give the body the opportunity to stabilize, recover, and move toward healing in a way that medications alone can never accomplish. When someone is truly determined to conquer diabetes, there comes a point where certain things simply must stop, not because they are morally wrong or because we want to be strict, but because the physiology of the body cannot heal while these substances are still entering the bloodstream. The pancreas, which has already been pushed to its limits by years of high glycemic meals, cannot recover as long as wheat and refined sugar continue to create those rapid spikes in blood glucose. Wheat, especially modern hybridized wheat, delivers amylopectin A into the system, a starch that sends blood sugar soaring higher and faster than table sugar itself. Every slice of bread, every bowl of pasta, every whole wheat cereal contributes to this constant assault. And someone might say, but I'm eating whole wheat, isn't that healthy? Only when the pancreas is strong. But when it is already exhausted, whole wheat still carries that same problematic starch. And for a diabetic trying to steady their glucose levels, even the healthier version becomes too much for the body to handle. The wiser step is to eliminate all wheat completely until the pancreas can regain its balance. Refined sugar, of course, is an obvious problem, but what many people don't raise is how deep its impact goes. It is not just about calories or sweetness. Refined sugar forces the pancreas into emergency mode. It demands a violent insulin response, and when this happens repeatedly, day after day, week after week, the pancreas becomes fatigued. People often say that they're addicted to sweets, but that addiction is biochemical, not a character flaw. High sugar forces the blood glucose up quickly, the pancreas releases a surge of insulin, and then blood sugar crashes. In that crash, the brain desperately craves a quick fix. What does it reach for? More sugar. It becomes a loop that traps people, leaving them tired, irritable, and dependent on something that is slowly wearing out their own organs. Once refined sugar is removed, there is discomfort at first, but something tremendous begins to happen after a few days. The cravings soften, the mind becomes clearer, the blood sugar stops bouncing like a yo-yo, and a sense of steady energy begins to return. Now, when a person is in the early stages of healing, they must also avoid even the natural sweeteners, things like honey, maple syrup, coconut sugar, palm sugar, because while these may be healthier in general, they still put pressure on the pancreas by raising glucose levels more quickly than the organ can comfortably handle in its weakened state. Once healing has progressed, Small amounts of natural sweeteners may be reintroduced, but in the beginning, the focus is to create a calm, low-demand environment for the pancreas to rebuild strength. Even caffeine must be stopped because caffeine can trigger an insulin response and stimulate the adrenal system, which in turn destabilizes blood glucose. Many people think they need caffeine to stay awake, but when the highs and lows of blood sugar disappear, the natural energy of the body returns and the dependence on stimulants naturally fades. It is remarkable how quickly people begin to feel better when these stresses are removed. I have watched men and women who followed every rule their doctor gave them, but continued eating whole wheat bread, oatmeal, pasta, and healthy sweets, wonder why their condition worsened each year. The moment they removed wheat completely, removed refined sugar, stopped the natural sugars just for a time, and eliminated caffeine, their blood sugar began stabilizing within days. One woman cried because she finally understood why she had been doing everything right yet still declining. The body cannot heal an environment that keeps harming it. Once those harmful inputs stop, the pancreas is no longer drowning. It can breathe again. It can recover. It can begin producing insulin more efficiently and allowing glucagon to stabilize the lows. And in that calm, internal environment, the healing that once felt impossible becomes entirely achievable. Legumes are one of the most powerful foods we have when it comes to stabilizing blood sugar, yet they are also one of the most misunderstood. Many people overlook them because they seem simple or humble, but inside each bean is a remarkable structure of fiber, protein, and slow-release carbohydrates that work again in a way almost tailor-made for the diabetic body. When you eat legumes every single day, you give your pancreas the gift of consistency. Instead of sending in a surge of glucose that demands a rush of insulin, legumes release their fuel little by little, almost like a time-release nutrient package, allowing the pancreas to respond calmly. The steady stream they provide is what every cell longs for because it prevents the highs and lows that wear the body down. I have seen people who struggled for years with erratic glucose readings finally experience stability just by incorporating beans into their daily meals.
Of course, the reason legumes work so beautifully is because they are naturally low on the glycemic index, and they are low not because they lack carbohydrates, but because the type of carbohydrates they contain are bound in such a way that the body must break them down slowly. The soluble fiber in legumes forms a gentle gel in the gut, slowing digestion and softening the impact of glucose release. Meanwhile, the plant protein helps maintain satiety and supports muscle repair, something that is especially important for diabetics trying to rebuild metabolic health. When eaten regularly, legumes help lower insulin resistance as the cells become accustomed to receiving just the right amount of glucose at a steady pace. This in turn reduces the urgency with which the pancreas must work, allowing it to rest, recover, and perform more efficiently. One challenge some people face with legumes is digestive discomfort, especially if they have not been eating them consistently. But this is not a reason to avoid them. It is simply a sign that the body needs a gentler introduction. Soaking the beans overnight, rinsing them thoroughly, and discarding the water helps remove the compounds that cause gas. Bringing them to a boil and skimming off the froth removes even more. Some people need an extra rinse midway through cooking, and that can make a remarkable difference. Long, slow cooking breaks them down further and makes them easier to digest. Even then, some individuals may need to start with only a teaspoon or two at first. I watched my own husband, who once could not tolerate brown lentils or kidney beans, gradually acclimate to them by increasing the amount little by little. Now he eats all varieties with ease, which shows that the gut can adapt beautifully if given time. What many also do not is that legumes contain only about a third of the carbohydrates found in grains, yet they provide more stability, more fiber, and more satiety. For someone trying to overcome diabetes, this is an invaluable advantage. When you replace a portion of grains with legumes, you reduce the glucose load on the pancreas without feeling deprived. In fact, many people tell me they feel fuller, more energized, and far more stable throughout the day. When legumes become a daily habit, whether in soups, salads, spreads, or stews, they act almost like a nutritional anchor, grounding the blood sugar in a steady rhythm. And over weeks and months, these small daily choices accumulate into powerful healing. The body begins to trust the consistency, the cravings lessen, the energy stabilizes, and the pancreas finally has room to rest, so it can begin to mend the strain that years of high glycemic eating have caused.
The moment a person begins to understand how the body handles fuel, they also begin to understand why exercise is not an optional extra, but a central part of healing diabetes. When you move your body, especially in short bursts of high intensity, you are doing something inside your cells that no medication on earth can imitate. You are turning on pathways that demand glucose, you are signaling to your muscles that they must open up and receive fuel, and you are building more insulin receptor sites on the surface of your cells. That means the very thing that was once resisting insulin now begins to welcome it. This is why exercise has such a profound effect on stabilizing blood sugar. It does not act through force, it acts through design. The body was made to move, and movement changes the way the entire metabolic system works. I watched this happen with Dan, the young man who came to our program as a type 1 diabetic. He had been told his pancreas was dead, yet his determination to reclaim his health made him willing to try everything he could. One of the first things he implemented every morning was high intensity exercise. He put on his shoes and ran up and down the hills, pushing his muscles just enough to activate those glycogen reserves that were waiting inside his cells. When he felt his blood sugar dropping at night, instead of reaching for candy like he had done in the past, he dropped to the ground and did 30 push ups. Those push ups released the stored glycogen in his muscles, raising his blood sugar naturally without food and without strain on the pancreas. His eyes lit when he realized that his body already held the solution inside itself. No one had it explained to him that glycogen was like a built-in battery pack that could be used whenever glucose was low. The more he exercised, the more efficiently his body handled glucose. This is what people often overlook. When the muscles are used intensely, they become hungry for fuel. They open more doors, build more transport channels, and respond to insulin with greater sensitivity. Instead of forcing the pancreas to work harder, exercise actually reduces the demand on it. The body begins clearing glucose out of the bloodstream faster and more effectively simply because the cells are eager for it. This is why high-intensity interval training is so powerful. It wakes up the muscles and trains them to handle glucose the way they were meant to. Even short bursts are enough. A few brisk hills, a few minutes of fast walking followed by slow walking, a cycle of push-ups or squats. I saw a similar transformation in Bobby, the man who arrived in a wheelchair with swollen legs at 90 units of insulin a day. He couldn't join the regular exercise classes, but that did not stop him. Every hour he stood on a mini trampoline and simply bounced gently for a minute. That simple movement stimulated his lymphatic system, reduced swelling, and improved circulation. As his body began to wake up, his blood sugar began to settle. Within days, the swelling was half of what it had been. By the end of 2 weeks, he was down to 10 units of insulin and feeling stronger than he had in years. Once home, he rode his bicycle 6 miles a day, swab laps, and continued rebounding. The man who had been told nothing more could be done discovered that movement was the key his body had been waiting for. When you exercise, you are not punishing the body, you are activating its deepest healing mechanisms. You are clearing the blood, increasing oxygenation, building insulin sensitivity, and unlocking the reserves that help stabilize glucose without relying on food. The more you move, the more responsive your cells become, and the less pressure falls on the pancreas. Movement becomes medicine, a living, breathing medicine that strengthens the entire system from the inside out. One of the most misunderstood parts of diabetes management is the role of hydration and the timing of meals. Many people have been taught to eat every 2 hours, believing that constant grazing will prevent their blood sugar from dropping. But what actually happens inside the body is the opposite. The digestive system needs time to complete its work, and the pancreas needs space between meals to stop releasing insulin and to rest. Every time food enters the stomach, whether it is a full meal or a tiny snack, the pancreas must respond again. It cannot heal when it is being repeatedly summoned.
Digestion takes about 3.5 to 4 hours. And when you honor that natural rhythm, eating a meal, then allowing the system to finish its work before you eat again, you create an internal environment where the pancreas can regain its strength instead of being pushed all day long. This is where hydration becomes so important. Often, what people think is hunger is simply thirst because the body signals can overlap. When blood sugar dips slightly between meals or when the person feels a little shaky, their instinct is to reach for food. But when the pancreas is healing, food is not always what the body needs. Dan discovered this beautifully. Instead of grabbing a snack, he took a little bit of natural mineral salt, followed by a glass of water. The salt restored the minerals his cells needed, and the water delivered them into the tissues. stabilizing his system without burdening his pancreas with more digestion. It is remarkable how a small pinch of Celtic or Himalayan salt, true mineral salts, not the stripped supermarket versions, can steady the body so gently. The body loses salt every day through sweat, urine, and simply living, and these minerals must be replaced for the cells to function properly. Without them, water cannot hydrate the tissues correctly, and the electrical balance of the cell goes off, creating fatigue, dizziness, instability, and cravings. When someone begins drinking more water, especially mineral rich water or water paired with a pinch of salt, their entire physiology shifts.
Their blood becomes less thick, their kidneys flush more smoothly, and their brain experiences fewer of those false hunger signals. Suddenly, they're no longer reaching for snacks because the body is receiving what it truly needed: hydration, mineral balance, and stability. And with that stability, the pancreas no longer receives constant alarms that demand insulin release. It begins to relax. It begins to function more naturally. The wild swings that once dominated the day start to soften. I've watched so many guests discover that the simple act of drinking adequate water, sipping throughout the day rather than gulping in large quantities, calms their cravings and settles their nerves. When hydration is right, energy begins to feel smoother and more sustained. And when proper spacing between meals is respected, the digestion becomes more efficient. The stomach empties properly, and the blood sugar remains far more stable. The body is incredibly wise. It gives gentle signals, but most people have been taught to silence those signals with snacks, caffeine, or sugar. When you return to these simple rhythms, hydrate well, support the cells with minerals, leave space between meals, you create the conditions the pancreas has been longing for. It does not have to panic. It does not have to scramble. It finally has the breathing room to repair what years of constant eating and dehydration have damaged. When we look at the way the body handles fuel, one of the most important principles to understand is how long food stays in the stomach and how steadily it releases its nutrients. This is where the combination of high fiber, generous protein, and healthy fats becomes such a powerful tool for stabilizing blood sugar and supporting the pancreas. When you build your meals around these three components, you create a slow, even graceful release of glucose into the bloodstream, and that is exactly what the pancreas longs for. Fiber slows digestion naturally, acting almost like a gentle brake. Protein provides structure, satiety, and stability. Healthy fats keep the food in the stomach a little longer so that the release of glucose is not rushed. Together, they create a beautiful harmony inside the digestive system, preventing the sharp rises and crashes that exhaust the pancreas. Most people today eat meals high in refined carbohydrates and low in fiber, low in protein, and low in healthy fats, which means the starches rate down far too quickly. The glucose rushes into the blood, the pancreas panics and sends out a big dose of insulin, and then the blood sugar drops too low, leaving the person tired, shaky, and craving something sweet again. This roller coaster becomes the daily life of a diabetic, and many do not know that it is not the disease causing all of this chaos, but the type of food entering the stomach. Once we switch to meals that contain a high amount of fiber from vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, and whole natural foods, the body shifts into a calmer rhythm. The stomach empties more slowly, and the release of glucose becomes controlled and gentle. When someone starts eating legumes, nuts, seeds, vegetables, low glycemic fruits, and natural proteins, they often notice that they stay full for longer. This fullness is not heaviness, it is stability. It is the body saying, I have enough fuel, and I can release it slowly. That steady release means the pancreas is no longer being shouted at all day long to send out insulin. It can finally relax, it can finally heal. The same happens when healthy fats are brought in. Fats that avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, flaxseed oil, and coconut cream do not harm the body the way damaged processed fats do. These natural fats actually soothe the digestive process. They give meals the staying power needed to maintain stable energy levels. They help the brain feel nourished and satisfied so that cravings begin to disappear naturally. When people remove the harmful fats, those found in deep-fried foods, margarine, and highly processed oils, they remove an irritant that was putting inflammation inside the gut and the bloodstream. These damaged fats slow down healing, but the right fats encourage it. Over time, guests at the retreat often tell me that eating this way feels easier than they expected. They are no longer thinking about food constantly because their meals keep them satisfied for hours. The mental fog begins to lift, the afternoon crashes disappear, and their mood becomes steadier. This combination of fiber, protein, and healthy fats creates a rhythm the pancreas can trust. It does not have to overreact. It does not have to compensate for sudden glucose spikes. It can deliver insulin in a gentle, measured way that honors the body's natural pace. This is why people see such dramatic improvements when they shift to meals built on these principles. The body was never meant to digest modern, refined, fast-burning carbohydrates all day long. It was designed to thrive on slow, steady, nourishing foods that work with its wisdom, not against it. Most people have been taught to fear fats without it being shown the difference between those that heal and those that harm. And when you look at the body through the lens of diabetes, you discover that fats play a far more important role than people realize. The right fats slow digestion, steady the release of glucose, feed the brain, nourish the nerves, and support the hormones that regulate metabolism. The wrong fats, however, inflame the bloodstream, disrupt cell membranes, and interfere with insulin's ability to do its job. So when we talk about conquering diabetes, we have to look carefully at the types of fats entering the body each day because they influence far more than energy or appetite.
They influence blood sugar stability at the cellular level. Healthy fats, the ones that come from nature in their whole form, are stabilizing and calming to the entire metabolic system. Avocados, nuts, seeds, olives, coconut cream, flaxseed, chia, and cold-pressed oils feed the body in a way that gives meals staying power. When healthy fats are present, the food stays in the stomach long enough to break down properly and release its nutrients slowly. That slow release protects the pancreas from being overwhelmed. Instead of a quick flood of glucose followed by a crash, the body receives a gentle stream of energy that supports clarity, strength, and satiety. Many people say that once they begin adding healthy fats to their meals, their cravings for sugar begin to fade on their own. It isn't willpower, it's physiology. A nourished body does not cry out for emergency fuel. But then there are the fats that damage, inflame, and block healing. These are the altered fats, deep fried oils, margarine, hydrogenated oils, and highly processed vegetable oils extracted using high heat. These fats enter the body in a distorted form, and the cells try to use them but cannot. They get built into the cell membranes in place of healthy fats, creating stiff, inflamed, dysfunctional cells that cannot communicate well with insulin. When the cell membrane is damaged, the insulin receptor sites do not function properly, which means glucose cannot enter easily.
So if the glucose stays in the bloodstream, the pancreas sees that high glucose and it screams for more insulin. And on and as this cycle goes. Many people think their problem is sugar alone, but these damaged fats are blocking the healing from the inside. When someone removes these harmful fats from their diet, something remarkable begins to happen. The inflammation starts to soften. The cell membranes become more receptive. The insulin receptors begin to work again. The body moves from a state of panic to a state of repair. I have watched people who struggle for years with unstable blood sugar begin to improve within days of removing deep-fried foods, processed oils, and margarine. Their digestion improves, their clarity returns, their energy feels cleaner, steadier, and more sustainable. And often the bloating and heaviness disappear because the body is no longer fighting the inflammation those fats created. Healthy fats do not interfere with insulin, they support it. They give the body time. They give the pancreas breathing room. They give the cells the structural strength needed to receive nutrients properly. When meals include healthy fats alongside fiber and protein, the entire digestive rhythm changes. Instead of fast spikes and drops, the body receives a long, stable curve of energy. This is what protects the pancreas. This is what heals the metabolism. And this is why choosing the right fats is not a small detail, but a central part of reversing the damage diabetes has caused. One of the most beautiful discoveries a diabetic can make is that the body already contains its own built-in rescue system, something so simple and so elegant that many people live their whole lives without knowing it exists. Inside every muscle cell sits a tiny storehouse of energy called glycogen. I often describe it as a small bunch of grapes tucked away quietly, waiting to be used when the body needs immediate fuel. Glycogen is the body way of saying, I have prepared for you. And yet most diabetics are never told about it. They are taught to fear low blood sugar, to panic when they feel shaky, and to reach immediately for sweets. But when you understand glycogen and how it works, you begin to see that the body is equipped with a natural built-in response to low glucose that does not require sugar at all. I watched this truth unfold in Dan, the young type 1 diabetic who came to the retreat determined to rebuild his health. At first, when his blood sugar dropped during the night, he reached for candy, and although it lifted his glucose, it always gave him a terrible headache. The next week, feeling guilty about the candy, he tried an apple instead, but eating an apple at 2 in the morning is not a pleasant experience. Then, during the third week, when he felt his blood sugar dipping, he did something completely different. He dropped to the floor and did 30 push-ups and said, "Okay, we'll give you 10 days." And I reckon that's a really good test. Let's just try it. And in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, the Bible says, "Prove all things." That's a challenge. Prove all things and hold fast. Even briefly, you signal the body to release that stored glycogen. The muscles say, "I need fuel right now," and the glycogen breaks down into glucose and flows into the bloodstream, giving immediate energy without burdening the pancreas. It is a natural, efficient, beautifully designed process that works with the body instead of against it. This is why movement is so important for diabetics, not just for fitness or weight control, but for the way it stabilizes blood sugar, using the body's own built-in reserves. And when glycogen begins to run low, the body turns to its next reserve fat. This is why Dan could wake up one morning with a glucose reading of 3, take a little salt water, go for a run, and return with a reading of 9 without a single bite of food. His body simply switched from its owed glycogen to its stored fat, converting it into the energy he needed. Many diabetics feel helpless when their blood sugar drops, as if they must rely on candy or juice or sugar to survive the moment. But when they believe that movement can trigger their own internal fuel stores, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to disappear. Confidence begins to grow. The body no longer seems like an enemy that needs constant feeding, but a partner with its own wisdom and resources. Glycan becomes a lifeline. Not because it is exotic or complicated, but because it is simple and already present. Once you understand glycogen, exercise is no longer a chore but a tool. A few push-ups, a brisk walk, a set of squats, even a gentle burst of movement can call those reserves forward. Instead of panicking and running to the kitchen, the diabetic learns to use the body's own design to restore balance. And the more they use it, the more sensitive their cells become, the better their metabolism functions, and the less pressure falls on the pancreas. Glycan truly is the diabetic best-kept secret, and once someone discovers it, everything about managing low blood sugar begins to shift into a place of understanding and empowerment. Most people have heard the word insulin resistance, but very few have truly understood what is happening inside the body when this condition develops. It is not a mystery, and it is not something the body chooses at random. Insulin resistance is the direct result of years of high glucose surges caused by the modern diet, especially the high intake of refined carbohydrates, wheat products, sugars, and frequent snacks that never allow the pancreas or the cells to rest. When glucose is constantly entering the bloodstream at high levels, the pancreas is forced to release large amounts of insulin to push that glucose into the cells. At first, the cells respond. They open their receptor sites like doors and let the fuel in. But after years of being pushed, pressured, and overwhelmed, those receptor sites begin to close. They become tired of the constant flood, and in a sense, they say, "I don't want to see you anymore." That is insulin resistance. The tragedy is that most people do not realize this is happening because the change is invisible. They notice the symptoms: fatigue, cravings, hunger soon after eating, weight gain, irritability, and eventually high fasting blood sugar. Meanwhile, the pancreas sees all that unused glucose floating in the bloodstream and does exactly what it is designed to do. It releases even more insulin. Now the person has high glucose and high insulin at the same time, and the cells remain closed. The body is screaming for fuel at the cellular level, yet the blood is drowning in it. It is no wonder people feel exhausted and confused. Their cells are starving while their blood is overflowing. This is why they feel sleepy after eating, why they crave sweets, why they feel weak even though they have just eaten. Nothing is getting into the cells because insulin no longer has a clear doorway. When insulin resistance grows over time, the pancreas becomes worn down. It cannot keep up with the constant demand. It has been releasing more insulin than it was designed to, day after day, year after year. Eventually, the pancreas reaches a point where it simply cannot produce enough insulin to force the cells open. And when insulin output drops and resistance remains high, the blood sugar levels rise steadily. This is the moment when many doctors finally diagnose diabetes, but the process has been developing quietly for years. It is not sudden. It is not mysterious. It is the body responding to a lifestyle that keeps flooding it with more carbohydrates than it was built to handle. People often foam their own bodies saying my pancreas is failing or my cells are broken, but the body is not the villain here. It has been warning them for a long time. It has been asking for better fuel, for more movement, for rest between meals, for foods that release glucose slowly. The beautiful part is that insulin resistance is not a life sentence. When someone adopts a lifestyle that lowers glucose release, increases insulin sensitivity, and calms the pancreas, those insulin receptors begin to open again. Exercise wakes up the cells, low glycemic foods reduce the pressure on the pancreas, avoiding wheat and sugar stops the rapid spikes. Spacing meals gives the body room to repair. Slowly the cells begin to trust insulin again. They start responding to gentle signals instead of harsh ones. I have watched people reverse insulin resistance with determination and patience. Their blood sugar stabilizes, their energy returns, their cravings fade, and their mood becomes steady. The cells that once refused to open begin welcoming fuel again because the pressure has been lifted. The pancreas, once exhausted, starts working in a more rhythmic, peaceful way. When the cause is removed, the resistance softens, the doorways open, the body finds its balance again in the quiet, steady way it always wanted to. When someone is told they have diabetes, especially type 1, they are often given the impression that their pancreas is beyond hope, that it is damaged beyond repair, and that nothing can be done except to manage the disease for the rest of their life. But what I have seen over and over again is that the human body is far more resilient than people realize, even when the beta cells have been injured or suppressed. Even when someone has been told their pancreas is dead, there is often still life there, still blood flow, still potential for recovery. I remember when Dan came to our program, he was only 19, diagnosed with type 1 diabetes after a strong course of antibiotics at age 15. His specialist told him outright that his pancreas was dead. I asked him a simple question. Is your pancreas gangrene? If it isn't, then there is life there. If blood is still flowing, healing is still possible. The life of the flesh is in the blood, and as long as blood moves through that organ, it can respond to changes in lifestyle. Dan followed everything we taught with deep commitment. He eliminated wheat, eliminated refined sugar, eliminated caffeine, adjusted his meal structure, increased his water intake, ate low glycemic foods, added legumes to every meal, and exercised with determination every single day. Slowly but surely, his insulin requirement began to drop. From 90 units a day, he went down to 10 units in just 3 weeks. What was happening? His pancreas, far from being dead, was beginning to work again. The blood sugar lows he had in the night were not signs of failure, but signs that he was taking too much insulin because his own pancreas was starting to release some. His body was coming back online, responding to the new environment he had created. But Dan wasn't the only one. There was Bobby, a man in his early 60s, wheeled into our retreat after having his lymph nodes removed from his groin. His legs were swollen from the flight, and he told me the doctors say they can do no more for me. He was on 90 units of insulin a day, along with multiple medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood thinning. He couldn't join the usual exercise program, so I told him to bounce gently on the rebounder for 1 minute every hour. That movement woke up his lymphatic system, and within 24 hours, the swelling in his legs was half gone. He followed the program with complete dedication. After 2 weeks, he was down to 10 units of insulin a day. 3 months later, he emailed me off all medication, feeling stronger than he had in decades, and 40 pounds lighter. Stories like this show us that the body responds to care. It will fight for life if we give it the conditions it needs. Type 1 diabetes is more complex than type 2, yes, but the pancreas is never as hopeless as people are led to believe. Some cases are more difficult, and not everyone will experience the same degree of improvement. But I have seen enough to know that healing is possible, function can return, and insulin needs can decrease because the body is designed with remarkable restorative potential. The key is to stop harming the pancreas, reduce the load placed upon it, and create an environment where it can rest, rebuild, and perform with whatever strength it still has. Every bit of healing matters, and even small improvements can dramatically change a person's experience of diabetes. One of the most important lessons a person can learn on the journey to overcoming diabetes is that healing is not just physical.
Right, it's physical, yes, but it is also deeply into the way we think, the way we rest, the way we listen to our bodies, and even the way we relate to God.
So many people come into a health program feeling defeated, as if their body has betrayed them, as if the pancreas is the enemy and the diagnosis is a prison. But when we begin to shift the way we look at the body, something profound begins to happen. Instead of fighting the body, we begin to cooperate with it. Instead of blaming, we begin to listen. Instead of despair, we begin to hope. The body was created with the ability to restore, repair, and rebuild, but it needs the right environment and it needs us to trust the process. I often remind guests that gratitude is a powerful healing agent. When you thank God for your pancreas, even when it is struggling, you acknowledge that it is still alive, still trying, still working as best as it can. When you thank God for your kidneys, your liver, your heart, your cells, you shift into a place of appreciation instead of fear. That shift softens the nervous system, calms the hormones, and brings the body into a more restful state where healing becomes possible. Stress and fear constrict, but gratitude opens.
Some people expect healing to be immediate, but I always tell them, thank God even if you do to heal in 3 months. And thank God even if you do to heal in 8 months, because every day you are moving in the right direction. Healing is taking place inside you longer you see the results on a blood test. Another essential part of this keynote is learning to prove things for yourself. The Bible says, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. That means do to take someone's word for it. Try it. Observe. Listen to your own body. You are with yourself every moment of every day. No doctor, no specialist, no nurse has that kind of access to your internal signals. Only you know how you feel after a meal, how your energy shifts with sleep, how your body responds to water, how your mind feels after a walk. Your body is always speaking, but most people have been trained to ignore it or silence it. When you begin to honor your body signals, you become your own best doctor. This is why we teach 2 meals a day at the retreat. We have seen thousands of times that when someone stops eating every 2 hours and instead gives their body space between meals, digestion improves, blood sugar stabilizes, and the pancreas begins to rest. It is not a rule for the sake of rule-making.
Very exciting hours ago.
Another principle rooted in the body natural rhythm. Another principle is hydration, slow, steady sipping throughout the day, not gulping, not flooding the body all at once. And then there is rest, real rest, physical and spiritual. When the Sabbath hours come and we stop striving and simply pause, something deep inside the body exhales. Healing requires that exhale. I have met so many people who thought they understood their disease but had never once stopped long enough to understand themselves. When they finally give the body proper fuel, proper rest, proper water, proper gratitude, and proper trust in God's design, their healing no longer feels like a struggle, but like a gentle unfolding of something that was always possible. The body was designed with extraordinary wisdom, and one of the clearest examples of that wisdom is the way it stores glucose. Instead of leaving all the sugar we eat floating around in the bloodstream where it could cause damage or instability, the body quietly tucks much of it away in the form of glycogen. These glycogen stores sit inside the muscle cells and the liver like tiny bundles of ready-made fuel. I often describe them as the body's emergency savings account. They don't make a fuss, they don't demand attention, but they are there waiting for the moment you truly need them. And what many diabetics never learn is that these glycogen stores are one of the gentlest, most natural ways to raise blood sugar without putting any extra strain on the pancreas at all. The beauty of glycogen is that it responds to movement. When you exercise, even for a minute or two, the muscles begin to call for fuel. They need energy immediately to keep contracting, to keep lift, to keep pushing you forward. In that moment, the body unlocks the glycogen node inside the muscle cells and converts it back into glucose. That glucose then enters the bloodstream and raises the blood sugar just enough to meet the need. No candy, no juice, no sugary snack, no emergency sugar rush. The body simply uses its own perfectly sorted reserves to take care of you. This is why I often tell diabetics that exercise is not only helpful for long-term health, but also a vital tool for those sudden dips that used to frighten them. I watched this lesson come alive in Dan, the type 1 diabetic who joined our program. In the beginning, when his blood glucose dropped at night, he reached for candy, and although it brought the level up, he always paid for it with a headache and a restless night. The next week, feeling uneasy about the candy, he tried eating an apple in the night instead, chewing slowly in the dark, wishing there were a better way. By the 3rd week, he discovered it. One night, when his glucose dipped, instead of reaching for food, he dropped to the floor and did 30 push-ups. It took less than an ick, and then he checked his blood again. It had risen beautifully. He had eaten nothing. His pancreas had done no extra work. His body had simply tapped into its glycogen stores to meet the moment. That realization changed everything for him. He felt empowered instead of frightened. He understood that his body was not helpless. It had built-in reserves that could support him if he only knew how to unlock them. And what unlocks them is movement, not hours of exercise, not exhausting routines. Sometimes it is just a brief burst of muscle activity, a brisk walk up the driveway, a set of squats, a few push-ups beside the bed. These little movements send a message to the muscles, and the muscles respond by releasing exactly what the body needs. When glycogen runs low, the body shifts again, this time to its fat stores. It begins breaking down fat to create new glucose. This is why Dan could wake up one morning with a very low reading, drink water with a pinch of salt, go for a run, and come back with a perfectly normal reading without taking a bite of food. His body had switched from glycogen to fat, providing fuel without burdening his pancreas. The more a person engages their muscles, the more sensitive those muscles become to insulin. The more efficiently they store glycogen, and the more quickly they can release it. That means fewer blood sugar swings, fewer emergencies, and far more stability. Understanding glycogen is like discovering a hidden door inside your own body. It reveals that the body is not working against you, it is prepared to help you. It waits for the cue, and that cue is movement. Insulin resistance is one of the most misunderstood conditions in the modern world, yet it is one of the simplest to understand once you know what is happening inside the body. The cells of the body were created to respond beautifully to insulin, to open up their little doors and allow glucose to enter so the cell can create energy. In a healthy body, this is a calm, peaceful process. But when the bloodstream is constantly flooded with glucose, the pancreas is forced to send insulin out again and again, and soon those gentle insulin doors begin to feel overwhelmed. The cells say in their own way that they cannot keep responding to this endless knocking, so they begin to resist. They do not open as easily. They begin to protect themselves from the flood, not realizing that by doing so they are making life more difficult for the whole system. Glucose stays in the blood, insulin rises higher, and the pancreas strains harder. The person feels exhausted, hungry, foggy, irritable, and confused. They think something is wrong with them, but in truth the body is simply trying to defend itself from the repeated onslaught. Insulin resistance is not a disease in isolation. It is a response, a shield, a cry for relief from the constant pressure placed on the cells. And the beautiful thing is that when the pressure is relieved, when glucose spikes stop and insulin levels fall back into a normal rhythm, those resistant cells can soften again. They can reopen. They can rebuild sensitivity. The body is always trying to heal when we remove the causes of distress. A major cause of insulin resistance is the constant eating pattern many people follow today. The idea that one must eat every 2 hours to keep blood sugar balanced has caused enormous harm. Every time food enters the system, whether it is a full meal or a tiny snack, the pancreas must respond with insulin. If someone eats at 8, then at 10, then 10 at 12, then 2, then 4, and then dinner, the pancreas has been summoned all day long without a sin rest. Digestion takes hours, but modern habits never allow those hours to complete. The pancreas works endlessly like a servant who is never permitted to sit down. It becomes weary, it becomes inflamed, it begins to misfire. Soon blood sugar becomes unstable, not because the body is broken, but because the body has been bullied into a pace it was never designed for. When people stop the habit of constant snacking and instead eat 2 or 3 proper meals spaced far enough apart for digestion to complete, something remarkable happens. The pancreas begins to breathe, the spikes soften, the lows soften, hunger normalizes, the body shifts from panic mode into healing mode. I have seen people who were hungry every hour suddenly feel satisfied for long stretches, not because of willpower, but because their system has finally been given permission to rest. And in that resting, the pancreas begins to recover its rhythm. It is often assumed that type 1 diabetes is fixed, rigid, without hope for improvement, but I have seen many individuals with type 1 diabetes experience extraordinary changes simply by shifting their lifestyle. Their pancreas may not produce enough insulin, but their cells can still change their level of receptivity. Their muscles can still open more insulin receptors. Their glycogen stores can still respond to exercise. Their digestion can still become calmer and more predictable. I watched a young man named Dan come into our program with 90 units of insulin a day and a belief that his pancreas was dead. He followed every principle with diligence: low glycemic meals, stopping wheat, stopping sugar, exercising daily, drinking water with minerals, spacing his meals, learning how to handle low blood sugar without candy, and within 3 weeks his insulin had dropped to 10 units a day. His blood sugar lows at night were no longer a sign of worsening disease, but a sign that his body was producing some insulin again. And then there was Bobby, wheeled into the retreat with swollen legs and a medical file that said, "Nothing more can be done." He was also on 90 units of insulin a day. He could barely walk. But within 2 weeks of following these simple lifestyle principles, he was also down to 10 units. Within 3 months, he was off all medications, cycling 6 miles a day, swimming 30 laps, losing weight, gaining strength, and feeling like a new man. These stories show us that the body always responds to kindness, always responds to rhythm, always responds to the removal of the pressures that injured it. Type 1 diabetes does not mean the whole body is broken. It simply means the body needs a different kind of tear. One of the greatest hidden contributors to the diabetic crisis is the fact that modern wheat is nothing at the wheat humans once ate. Most people have no idea that in the 1950s and 1960s, wheat underwent aggressive hybridization to increase yield. The stalks were shortened, the grain was enlarged, and the internal starch structure changed dramatically. Out of that process came amylopectin A, a form of starch that breaks down so quickly in the body that it raises blood sugar faster than table sugar. Even whole wheat contains this starch. In fact, whole wheat spikes blood sugar even more than white flour because it contains more amylopectin A. People who think they are making healthy choices by switching to whole wheat bread are heartbroken when they discover that their healthy bread is the very thing causing their blood sugar to rise uncontrollably. I once spoke to a woman who cried as she realized that a doctor had been increasing her insulin every 6 months, even though she was eating healthy whole grains. No one told her that the wheat she relied on had been changed. No one explained that this modern grain was overloading her pancreas every day, and when she removed wheat from her diet, just wheat, her blood sugar steadied within days. Modern wheat is not inherently evil, but it has been altered in a way that does not honor the delicate rhythms of the human body, and the diabetic body, being more sensitive, feels the consequences more severely. The beauty is that there are alternatives, and they are not strange or difficult.
Rich grains such as stout and corn and quinoa will out then hybridized away from wheat has. Their structure is supposed to work originally designed. They contain natural fibers, natural proteins, and starches that break down more slowly, preventing the rapid glucose spike that overwhelms the pancreas. Many people who cannot tolerate modern wheat find that they do wonderfully on ancient grains. Their digestion feels calmer, their blood sugar becomes steadier, their meals feel more satisfying. These grains were once common in many regions of the world, but modern agriculture replaced them with high-yield varieties. Now they are returning because people are realizing the difference. A slice of bread made from einkorn or spelt feeds the body without shocking it. It gives a gentle rise in glucose rather than a sharp surge. It respects the body's natural rhythm instead of assaulting it. I always tell guests that ancient grains are not a luxury. They are a return to sanity, a return to biology, a return to the brain that was meant to nourish us rather than harm us. Another often forgotten element in diabetes healing is hydration. People think they are hungry when they are actually dehydrated because the body sends similar signals. Proper hydration is not simply drinking a lot of water, it is drinking water that the cells can use. And the cells require minerals to pull water inside. When water is consumed without minerals, it often passes through the body without hydrating it deeply.
This is why a small pinch of Himalayan or Celtic salt followed by a glass of water can have such a stabilizing effect. These salts contain dozens of natural minerals, not just sodium and chloride like table salt. When a diabetic drinks water with these minerals, the cells receive hydration, the blood becomes less sticky, cravings lessen, and the nervous system calms. Dan discovered this at the retreat. Whenever he felt his blood sugar dropping between meals, instead of eating, he took a tiny bit of mineral salt and followed it with water. Within minutes, he felt stable, clear, and calm. His body was simply needing hydration and minerals, not food. This one simple habit prevented him from snacking, prevented glucose spikes, and supported his healing in a profound way. Hydration is one of the body's most underestimated medicines. When you look at all of these principles together, removing modern wheat, avoiding frequent snacking, choosing low glycemic foods, exercising wisely, hydrating with minerals, and allowing the pancreas to rest, you begin to see a pivot of true healing. True healing is not complicated. It is consistent. It is generous. It is quiet. It honors the body design rather than fighting against it. The pancreas cannot heal when it is being assaulted by high glycemic foods all day. The cells cannot heal when they are forced to shut down because of constant insulin pressure. The muscles cannot heal when they are never used. The digestion cannot heal when it is constantly interrupted. The body is always trying to repair itself, but it needs space, patience, and cooperation. I have seen people arrive discouraged, afraid, overwhelmed, and uncertain, only to discover that when they stop abusing the pancreas and start supporting it, the body begins to move toward balance almost immediately. Hunger steadies, sleep improves, mood calms, blood sugar smooths out. The body is not working against us. It is waiting for us to stop working against it. When we give it the right foods, the right rest, the right movement, and the right hydration, it answers that kindness with healing.